All right, I'm here with Maggie Reyes, who's a life coach and writer and creator of Modern Married. And I got to say, I really like the name of your site, of your brand, because I have been with my husband. We've been married for 11 years, and we're both 44 years old, but we've been together since we were 23. And I often find there's something that there is a very different way of relating than our parents' generation. And so this idea of being committed to marriage and also being committed to a very modern marriage, to me, it really resonated. So I'm glad to have you on the show. And we're going to start off by talking a little bit about some of your theories around creating safety in your marriage, and we'll look at this from your perspective, and then I'll kind of chime in with a bit from the yoga perspective.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to have a super fascinating conversation. I think I'm just as excited as all the listeners are right now. And absolutely, the idea of a modern marriage that is totally different than maybe what we saw on TV when we were growing up, which is totally unrealistic, is what all my writing is about. So, absolutely happy to talk about that. With regards to creating safety, so I was, before the show started, I was saying that I have this theory that as humans, we feel safe in the womb. And then the minute we leave the womb, our whole life is a quest for safety. And the way that that's expressed in marriage is when you feel safe in a marriage, when you feel safe in a relationship, and you can think about it with any relationship. With you feel safe with your boss, you can be vulnerable with your boss, and you can present a new idea, and you can experiment. You can be wrong, and it's okay, right? So the idea of safety in relationships really goes across the board. And when we don't feel safe, that's when relationships break down, right? So if we know this and we set the intention to create safety, one of the things that I talk about is how you can create safety even in an argument. And it's very different when you argue from a point of view of creating safety than from a point of view of being right.
Yeah.
So if I were to prove I'm right, then that's one intention, right? And in yoga, we're always setting an intention at the beginning of our practice, and we're setting an intention at the beginning of a conversation, maybe. So if my intention is how can I create safety here, the whole conversation is going to flow differently. I would guess, just like in yoga, it would flow differently depending on the intention that you set. What do you think about that?
I agree, but I kind of want to back up a step because one of
Sure.
the things that I sense is if a person is not like when I think of like what you're saying of like coming out of the womb and how it's like all of a sudden you go from like that's pretty safe space in the womb, hopefully
Yeah.
that was a safe space,
Yeah.
to outside of the womb. There's an independence that starts to happen. Like now you have your body is independent of your mother's body, and my sense is like what in a healthy individual, in a thriving individual, what starts to be cultivated. And first, it's by the whoever's responsible for the child who creates this, is a sense of like you deserve to be here.
Yes.
It's okay to be in your body. And when people don't have that, and I'm sure you and I both work with a lot of adults who don't have that. They don't have that
Yes.
foundational like I deserve to take up space. I
Yes.
deserve to be in this body.
Yes.
I deserve to have this life. That if they don't have that in themselves, like good luck
Yes.
being able to do that with another person.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so obviously we all start with ourselves, and that's a theme that runs across the work that I do is not with couples, it's with individuals. So usually it's with wives, occasionally it's with a husband or two who's very bold and wants to work with me as well. But it absolutely starts with, what do I need for myself? How do I honor that need? And in fact, one of the themes that comes up quite a bit is a lot of women rely on their husbands, over rely to meet all these different needs. And when they don't meet all of them, they think something is wrong in their relationship. And the truth is, maybe he doesn't want to hear about, 12 hours of the latest yoga pose marathon that just happened. That doesn't mean he doesn't love you. That's just not his passion and his interest, right? Let me go talk to my yoga friend about that. So creating safety for ourselves, for our own needs, and honoring what those needs are is absolutely part of the process of creating safety with someone else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my sense is if someone, I mean, what I hear you describing too is more of like a fixed mindset or a victim mindset where someone is, thinking that. I mean, it's sort of like the Cinderella story, right? That someone is going to take care of like every whim and desire, and it's a very immature
Mm-hmm.
understanding of
Mm-hmm.
of relationship to, wow, I'm in control of my own reality, and wow, I can co-create
Mm-hmm.
the kind of relationship that I want, and in doing so, I will have to learn and grow.
That is absolutely spot on. And what you see in a beautiful parallel with yoga is about bringing awareness to your body, right? It's about bringing awareness to your breathing, how you're moving, integrating these different things happening at the same time. And a lot of times that emotional, we'll call it emotional immaturity, is present because there's no awareness. And once you bring awareness, oh, this unarticulated expectation that I had that I don't even know where I got it is causing me pain and suffering. But now that I'm aware of it, I can make a different choice. I can do something else. So that concept of bringing awareness is a beautiful sort of flow. That if you're practicing yoga, it's like having that practice of awareness in your loving relationships as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So do you want to give an example of what you mean?
Sure. So, um, a recent example was, well, my husband doesn't want to do XYZ. We don't have to go into the detail. And it was like, well, why is it my line of questioning as a coach was, well, why is that important? What does that mean? One of the best questions that we can ask ourselves is, what am I making this mean? The fact that he doesn't want to do this thing. And basically, the person involved was making it mean that he didn't love her because he didn't want to do the thing. Now, he loves her with all his heart. He's just not interested. If it was my case in my house and watching 12 hours of Oprah, like there's never too much Oprah for me, right? But but the fact that my husband doesn't want to spend 12 hours watching Super Soul Sunday, it does not mean that he loves me any less. And a lot of times we assign these meanings to things. They're not useful and they're not helpful in our relationship. So when you bring awareness to that and you say, well, what am I making that mean? I'm making that mean he doesn't love me, but that's not actually true. Then you can say, well, okay, it just means he's not interested in this topic. And then you can move on to the next thing. So that piece of being aware allows you to make a different choice and have a different experience in the relationship.
It's interesting because a lot of what I'm hearing you say is that people don't. A lot of the people you're working with, and a lot of issues that are coming up in modern marriages are a sense. At least what I'm hearing is that people are not self-fulfilled, and the word in yoga for that is purna or purnatvan. It's like the fullness of consciousness is within you. So the consciousness itself is both full and it's empty. And the word for empty, it's often used as a word from Buddhism called shunyata, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you're full, but what you're full of is its essence. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's not another person doing something for you. It's not another person saying something to you. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with other, right? It has nothing to
Mm-hmm.
do with anything outside of the self, and it doesn't even have that much to do with the self. It's the essence of being, which is subtler than the essence
Mm-hmm.
of self. And if we are connected to that, we are. It's like everything orients from an entirely different reality. And then a lot of these issues are they're not part of this plane of
Yes.
experience. They're part of a different plane of experience. So we're on the plane of experience of like needing other people in order for us to feel fulfilled,
Yes.
right? It's like needing someone to
Yes.
say a certain thing in a certain way on a certain
Right.
day at a certain time, or like needing someone to, like you were giving the example of like do what we want to
Mm-hmm.
do in order to have that experience of connection or
Mm-hmm.
fulfillment. We, in
Mm-hmm.
my experience, like we actually just want to go directly to. And it's probably why you're saying like you work with the individual instead of the couple,
Yes.
because you want to go
Yes.
right to helping that person with what,
To that.
yeah,
Yes.
that essence of like, hey, are you
So
okay in you? Because if you're not
yes.
deeply
Mm-hmm.
fulfilled within yourself, like stop looking for that outside of yourself.
That is absolutely spot on. So the things that we do and from a coaching perspective is, let's call it mental yoga. So I might give an exercise on self appreciation. And like make a list of 10 things that you're proud of, that you love about yourself. Why do I assign that as coaching homework? Because you're getting back in touch with who you are as a person and able to appreciate what you have accomplished in this life that we all have. And it's an avenue to help you return to that fullness feeling that you're describing, from the mental perspective, connecting your thoughts to that experience. I'm really curious to know, in yoga, what are the yoga practices that connect you to fullness? How does that path go from the yoga side?
Yeah, I mean, there's different levels, right? Depending on the person's level of consciousness. But when I look at, and especially for a lot of people, I think listening to this show, it's almost the it's almost the opposite of going deeper into you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like going deeper into the egoic self, which is based on
Mm-hmm.
your accomplishments in the world. Like if I look at my accomplishments, I could say like,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, the schools I have degrees from, the number of people I've been able to influence through my work, whatever, the number of people influenced by my book, by my courses, the number of people that I'm mentoring, the number of people that are part of my business team that I'm helping provide, for their families, et cetera. Like I could look at all that, but that is only going to be it's going to be extrinsic. It's going to be
Mm-hmm.
external to the essential experience of fulfillment, because all of those things they're relative and transient, and
Right.
they're very much on the outside, right? But on the inside is this dissolution of me needing to actually do anything. So instead of the
Right.
doing, going
Mm-hmm.
right into the core of being, of like, can I just like sit, eyes open or eyes closed, or even stand, you know,
Yes.
relaxed, slightly
Right.
bent knees, can I just like stand and actually experience the fulfillment of being that's always already available. Because if I can do that, then any action I take, anything I do in the world, including any relationships I may cultivate, are going to be based on me essentially being okay with existence, with
Yeah.
existing.
That's key. And that brings us back to that whole safety, like feeling that it's safe for you to take up the space that you take in the world, and feeling that not only is it safe, but it's this beautiful, self actualized, self developed opportunity that you have to express yourself to your maximum degree. And what's interesting is sometimes people are so far away from that. Like you and I, we obviously, you're a yoga master, and I love it as a as a student, and we're in touch with that. And you tell me, oh, connect with your being, and I can imagine myself just sitting here with you, maybe not even talking, and just looking in each other's eyes and feeling that moment of fullness, right, in each other's souls. Some people are so disconnected from that it's almost like they have it inside them, but they have to walk there. They have to walk there, and they have to take like steps on a ladder.
Yeah.
They take one step, and sometimes they take the outer step that brings them to the inner step. They can't
Yeah. Yeah.
they
Right.
can't always just jump to that.
Yeah.
And I think uh, that's just part of, I don't know, the mysteries and adventures of life in a
Well, it's
way.
like first you got to get in and own your life and own your accomplishments before you can get, your
Yeah,
degree. And that's where it's like
yeah,
that's where like that developmental ladder,
yeah,
right? Of like where,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly, absolutely.
So in some of the work that you've been interested in or doing around de-escalation of violence or eliminating,
Yeah,
I like that video you've got on your
yeah,
website with the Salt Lake City police force and how they've dramatically changed their training based on
yes,
having a goal of having zero police caused deaths, right?
yep.
And the
Hmm.
sense of how we can do that in our just everyday relationships with our in our marriages, in our families. Do you want to just go ahead and talk a little bit
Yeah,
about what you've
sure,
seen?
absolutely. So there's this great video that went viral where the Salt Lake City Police Department is basically showing them how they de-escalate a potentially violent situation, and the whole focus is that they've invested all this money in training, because you would think that police officers would be trained to know how to de-escalate violence, but what they're trained on is how to eliminate the threat. So a very different perspective when you say, how do I eliminate a threat? or when you say, how do I de-escalate this situation? How do I bring peace to this situation? Right? Totally different question, totally different process, and totally different outcome. So I was fascinated by that when I saw the video, and I thought, wow, marriage is the same. If I go into an argument or into a discussion that isn't even an argument yet, and I'm like, well, I want what I want, and that's it, as opposed to, I want to create more connection with you. I want to see where we agree. I want to see where we can move forward on this, even if it's not like the perfect thing. Totally different outcome, totally different results. And it reminded me when I was thinking about that and thinking about coming on the show about Ahimsa, which is one of my favorite yoga concepts ever. And this idea of nonviolence. How do I approach it from nonviolence? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, yeah, and just to go back to like the intention, right? If like going into say there is something that you need clarity or resolution on with your partner, with any kind
Yep.
of partner
Yes.
or relationship, it's like what like one of the things that I always look at is like desired outcomes. Like what are my desired
Mm-hmm.
outcomes,
Right.
from this? And then
Right.
and in that, it's like you can hear the intention in it, and you
Yes.
can also start to steer towards there. And then often what'll happen is if we do have shadow issues at play, we'll notice where like at some point we like veer into some old probably ancestral
Right.
relational pattern, and we'll be able to see it,
Right.
right? And so to me, in that,
Yes.
like that's where the ahimsa comes into play, is just that being able to like to see these, like the way that we are violent to each other is so increasingly subtle as our relationships become more and
Yes.
more evolved, right? So we're no longer talking about like
Right.
battery in the household,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's this like subtle
Mm-hmm.
perpetuation of whatever, of ego or of disconnectedness, or of creating a more than less than.
Yes.
In yoga philosophy and in tantric philosophy, there's the concept of the malas that are interesting. I think these are like the ways that we close down,
Mm-hmm.
from spirit, from self, and obviously also from each other. And one of them is what we kind of talked about originally, like that safety, or it ties into not being worthy. I think Marcia
Mm-hmm.
Peer nailed it in her "I'm Not Enough" video that went viral. But it's a sense
Mm-hmm.
of like I'm not worthy of whatever, fill in the blank, or just and put a period after that, right? And so that's the heart closure. And so we can also do that with each other. Like either I'm not worthy of
Yes.
you or you're not worthy of me,
Yes.
right? And that's a violation right there. Like that's a himsa, right?
Yes.
That's
Right.
himsa. That's violence against
Right.
the reality of
Yes.
like, no, wait, actually, we've all got a fair shake here.
Exactly.
The second one is the closure of the third eye, where you're just like measuring mayamala. So you're like, I'm better than, or you're better than. I'm less than,
Mm.
you're more than, or I'm, you're more than, or you're less than, I'm more than. Like, however, you can do either way.
Right.
I'm more
Right.
than, you're less than. You're
Mm-hmm.
more than, I'm less than. And in that, it's like you're just measuring. And that, at some point, if we're looking for deep connectivity, like, we got to throw that one out the
Right.
window. We got to be really
Exactly.
less interested in that. And then it's interesting because the next one's karma mal, and that's more like third chakra, or solar plexus of like power center, and it's an action. It's like failure to act in alignment with, in my experience, it's like what potentially can happen, like
Mm.
that potential desired outcome, even if it's
Right.
scary as all hell, or even if you've never done it before, or even if it brings you into a really unknown space, and that's also a contraction. And sometimes that action is through new speech patterns. So when I'm hearing you talk about this work in like this de-escalation of the violence, right, or
Right. Yeah.
de-escalation of intense, of like just a negativity, right, of
Right.
like a past pattern that like we know where that's going to go and it's not where we want to
Yes.
go anymore. Like that would be
Yes.
karma mala. If we can actually change the action, if we can actually change our speech, then that releases that contraction.
That is huge. I love that about changing your speech. And I talk about that actually a lot. Are you speaking love into your relationships? What are you planting into your relationship? And if you think of also making decisions in accordance with the vision that you have, that general desired outcome that you mentioned, that's the same idea as the intention you put into the conversation. Do I want to connect here, or what is the outcome that I want here? You make a decision on how you relate to the other person based on the outcome that you want to have with that person. And it's incredibly powerful when you're able to do it. It's amazing.
Yeah, I agree. And to me it's fascinating how this is where, if we sort of look at like where relationships are going, and how
Hmm.
if we look at that and we parallel that to where a lot of spiritual enlightenment practices are going, they're going into this refined experience in the collective. They're going into
Yes.
this like, wow, we have many more senses than five. Like, we have many more ways of knowing and connected. We're way more sensitive than in the past we've had access to being. Right? So in
Yes.
the past, like, we just had, I mean, it was hard. Like 100 years ago, like the lives of our ancestors were challenging. Like 200 years ago,
Yes.
like you're talking like no running water in the household, no electricity. Like you kind of go back and see like
Right.
where we've come from, right? And like just the, wow, women have been able to like own land for how long? Able to vote for how long? Like this is recent history. And so as we're in this more level playing field now, we're able to access some of our subtler senses. And as we're also able to take control of our reproductive lives, right? So that we're
Yes.
not just like totally overextended all the time, but we're actually able to
Yes.
keep developing and evolving. Not that we can't do that with a lot of children. I don't mean to like totally say that, but it's just much easier to do when you're caring for fewer people.
Well, just putting intention behind it. Before it was just what
Yes.
you did, and it was an unconscious choice. My grandmother, so one generation away, had 7 kids. My mother had one child, right? And so
Mm.
I think just bringing that awareness to that choice, whatever the choice is, there's no
Yeah.
wrong choices,
Right.
right?
It's a choice
But
now.
yeah, that's the difference, is that you have the ability to make the choice.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
But there is something to agree. I totally agree.
yeah,
Like A, choice, but then like B, the amount of time you actually have to continue to grow, evolve, self-care and develop. Like self-care is really hard with 7 kids.
agree, a hundred
Unless
percent
you
agree.
have a staff. If you have a
Right,
staff, like no problem. But if you don't
right,
have a staff and you're like
yeah,
cooking and cleaning and doing laundry and feeding and doing more cooking and
yes,
cleaning and laundry, right? Like if you're just like in that, like your own personal development only has so much room. And it's also super, I think it's really super intense, the amount of reactivity that's been built into child rearing, right? Because we have to be able, yes, we can be proactive, but we also have to be able to react to the needs of like the baby's crying, the 2-year-old just
yes,
fell down, the 6-year-old, blah blah blah, the teenagers hanging out with people that are going to get them in trouble, right? Like there has to be a real, like there's a lot of that awareness that's going into the survival of the family.
yes,
And now a lot of that, as women are taking more, many women are choosing, we just see this with like levels of education and levels of socioeconomic development, like women are choosing to have fewer kids. They're able
right,
to put that subtle sensitivity into relationship, and then the relationship is able to grow and evolve. So what we see in a lot of the issues in like the modern marriage is like we have this sort of surplus of sensitivity, reactivity, time to connect, co-connectivity, co-creativity, collaborative intelligence that's now being plugged into relationship. And so to me it's like it's such a wide open field there.
yes,
And if we're in relationship and we're like, wow, we really actually wanting to evolve our relationship and both parties are coming to the marriage in that, it's like, what are the new rules? Like
yeah,
how do we really want to resolve issues? Like how do we want to create our lives together now that we have so much more freedom than what we
yes.
had when we were just trying to like get people fed and bathed and.
I'll tell you, that touches me directly, literally, because I've been married for 10 years and I'm childless by choice. So I have infinite amounts of compassion for women that, are not in my situation, but I made a conscious decision that that's how I wanted to live my life. And literally the reason that Modern Married started was because I was getting married. I had just gotten married, and I thought, I'm not the traditional quote unquote, whatever that means, wife. I don't cook. My husband cooks. I'm his assistant. I'm not a mom, so I'm not doing all the mom things that moms do, which God bless them, because that's awesome. But that's not me. So who am I in the face of that? Who am I as a wife, independent of these other sort of prescribed roles that we have had in our society? is like the reason that I started writing about it, to discover it for myself and to articulate that. Because when I was first getting married, I didn't know that transition between bride and wife and who was I becoming as part of this unit was something that my brain could not compute. Well, what is this going to be like, and how am I going to manage this? And so what you just said is absolutely, I think, is like the next frontier of relationships, where we are all defining what they're going to look like, and they're not going to look like they looked for the last 100 years.
Yeah. 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 And like, regardless of, you know, how many kids we have or whatnot, like there's that part of that is just like, because as relationships evolve, we have access to that in the collective, you know, like we actually have, we're witnessing it. Often we can see like, oh, I like their marriage. Like there's certain elements, and my husband and I often talk about that when we talk about, you know, how we want to be in 5 years and 10 years and 20 years. It's like we can look to see like who's got a sort of model marriage that we want to role model after, and what's different about that than how we are now. Right, like how are they doing things differently than we are? What are their conversations like? How are they using their? You know, it's interesting. Like one of our family values is we enjoy our time together and our time apart, and that's not just me and my husband, but also for my child. And that's something that, oh my gosh, it's so fascinating. Just from focusing on that as one of our family values, we've been able to like more or less dissolve any of the sort of the typical shadow issues around how we all choose to self-develop and who we choose to spend time with. And we're all in many ways, while we are a unit, we're also these really autonomous agents in charge of our own lives.
Right.
But we're able to collaborate, and we're able to really help each other have the different experiences that we're wanting to have, and have some of the different relationship dynamics that we can have, both one-on-one with each other as a whole unit, and then having a lot of different relationships totally outside the family unit or totally outside the marriage. And it's interesting because it can bring up all sorts of, you know, threats if we don't look at them, of like, oh, you know, just who we're choosing to spend time with, and how and why.
That's really fascinating. It reminds me of one of my hypotheses, that in marriages there are teams and there are alliances. And the reason that your family value, what you just described, works so well is because even though you're independent, you're all part of a team with the same goal.
Yeah.
And that goal is clearly defined, and the goal is we enjoy our time together and our time apart, and we value that, and you value that as a team, as a whole, as a unit. And so the team prioritizes that and supports that value that you have clearly articulated. So teams are the kinds of marriages that last, right? Because you're working together towards one goal and you're both on the same path. What happens a lot, and especially if you've heard of this idea of gray divorce, there's a lot of older people who are divorcing. Yeah. And it's fascinating. I started reading a little bit about that. I'm like, why is that happening? How fascinating. And as I was reading what they were describing that was happening in their relationships, I had this light bulb moment of, oh, it's an alliance. It's not a team. So what's an alliance? An alliance is like the US and the UK. When our interests align, we, go to the same place and we do the same thing, and then that's all good. When our interests don't align, you're on your own, buddy. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. And what happens too is, if we look at how the alliances are, like the terms with any alliance, like, NATO or you take,
right, exactly,
or anything, like the terms change over time.
Yes.
With new
yes.
marketplace conditions,
right,
you have a change. And the same thing's happening with these great divorces, where you have, you basically have a change in market conditions. Kids go off to college,
right?
Someone retires.
Yep.
Someone else decides they want to start to travel. Someone decides they don't want to do that. Someone, there's really different socioeconomic needs. Like the terms have actually changed, and then the alliance either continues or it busts. And I do really agree. I know there's a lot of generational differences that I see in, just between the boomers and Gen X, and one of those is that sense of Gen Xers. Many of us. We did marry someone that we were really close friends with.
Yes.
It was definitely in that of like, wow, this is going to be Like, I don't know who you're going to become, but this is going to be fun because, like, who you're starting off with is great, and we have the same core values, and, like,
Yeah.
let's just go see what happens. And with a lot of, when I look back to a lot of boomers, there's a lot of very unexpressed contracts,
Right.
right? Like,
Right.
you bear the kids, you take care of me, and you go work. And, like, a lot of things that were just, and it was like falling in love, but it was the courtship was very different. They often didn't live together before they got married, right? They hadn't sorted out a lot of those value differences before engaging in that contract. There's a
Right.
lot of, like, keeping, they'll leave it to Beaver, like, look good from the outside in instead of having an
Right.
experience from the inside out.
Yeah.
And as we see, it's like where it's going to go with Gen Y is my guess it's going to go like another step deeper into, at least on the functional side, it's going to go way deeper into A, team,
Yes.
and B, into identity evolution of, like, I'm going, it's like, as long as our core values are saying the same, like, I allow you to become whoever you want to be next. I allow you that sort of flexibility of character. And if we don't
Yes.
stay engaged with that, like, we're really, we're definitely in for something that's less fulfilling and probably shorter term.
I love what you said. I allow you. And it doesn't even matter what comes after that. When you're able to have a relationship with anyone where you allow them to be who they are as they are today without wanting to change anything about them,
Yeah.
that is to me master level love. That's choice based love. I choose to love you. I don't need to always understand you. I don't need to always share your same interests, but I allow you to be whoever you are in that, beautiful magnificence. See, what happens is market conditions can't affect that. Market conditions will not have an impact on that. That's a much deeper level of the experience of what love can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. So with just in closing, I just want to talk a little bit about, like, longevity of relationship. I'm definitely in that time of life where I've seen a number of people, like, stay together for a decade and then start to break up, and then I've seen
Right.
also the same thing of people staying, in my peer group, of people who are, like, just definitely in it for the long haul. And obviously statistically it's, where what actually, I don't know the stats anymore. It used to be 50-50. What are we at now?
It's really interesting. I've tried to get a real number and the numbers always conflict. So here's what happens. The divorce rate has actually gone down, but you can't look at that as a whole number because less people are getting married.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
So when you try to talk about a number, and I'm not a statistician or anything like that, it's basically you can rest assured people are being more intentional about their relationships because the divorce rate has gone down and less people are getting married. Both of those things coexist together.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there seems to be, to me, as a unique opportunity in mating long term.
Yes. Okay. Oh my gosh. This is one of my favorite questions ever. Let me just tell you this. Feel the excitement. Research has actually shown that thriving healthy marriages, what we have discussed as a healthy exchange, is actually good for you. It's good for your health. So people have studied this. You make more money, you live longer, and you live healthier during those extra years that you're living when you're in a thriving relationship. When you're in a toxic relationship, it has the same effect as smoking does on the body. So it's of priority and high importance that if you're going to be in a relationship, you practice the yogic principles, you practice the awareness, you bring the Ahimsa to it, because that's good for every other aspect in your life.
Yeah.
And if you're in a toxic relationship, whatever you can do to bring healing to that is number one, it will have an outer effect on every other aspect of your life on earth.
Yeah. Well, I like that you made that distinction of, like, just staying in a relationship. Is that, like, longevity is
Yeah,
secondary to
right.
thriving in that relationship. So if you can't
Correct.
thrive in the relationship with your end, and usually when I see it this in my community and coaching a lot is, like, usually there's a core values difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, someone has a growth mentality, someone has a victim mentality, like, and is not willing to evolve into a growth mentality. Like, fundamentally, that's not going to be a healthy relationship. So longevity to the relationship is going to disadvantage both well, maybe not disadvantage both partners, but definitely disadvantage the growth person.
Exactly. I think in the past, if we look at, different generations, longevity was the premium.
Yeah.
Oh, if it lasts, then it's
Right.
automatically good.
Right.
Now, in our generation, longevity is not the measuring stick that we use. It's, is
Right.
it thriving? And to bring it back to that principle, I
But I
forgot the
think it's
name.
something to aim for. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
if because we are also so disposable, and many people are really quite narcissistic. I think we covered that in the beginning of just, or you
yeah,
covered it really well with the like the me in relationship and not
yeah,
really getting the
yeah.
fulfillment piece. But it's like it's like once we're at a certain place, we in my sense, it's like if we wanted, and not everyone wants to be in a relationship, but if we do, it's very much
Yes,
worth investing in the long, if both people are growth oriented and have the same
yes,
values core, like being really committed to like where the flexibility that stability enables. And that
yes,
then we can actually test our bounds so much more. We can test our growth. And like you were saying, like one of the side benefits of that is like you're wealthier,
yes.
right? And then like
Healthier
part of
and
the reason
healthier.
is
Yes,
like you can take more safe evaluated risk. And I would say too, there's a level of that inner body security that can happen where you're able to actually like leave the nest further because there's
correct.
something to come back to.
Exactly. Absolutely. Longevity is absolutely a worthy and valuable goal. My only distinction is I think in the past there were generations where it was longevity at the expense of my full self.
Yeah.
And so when that conversation comes up, I just have to mention longevity for the win. I mean, I'm all in. Like I'm there.
Yeah.
Um, but that, and then that idea of my philosophy, I mean, I'm a relationship coach. So obviously I believe in the power of, marriage and relationships. And sometimes the most healing and the highest good is to end a relationship.
Yeah.
But let's throw everything at it first. Let's not just say, oh, this is not right for me. Let's
Right.
throw everything at it. Let's take personal responsibility. Let's practice de-escalating. Let's do all these things. And if you do all these things and it's still not the right place for you, you know that you're making that choice from an empowered place.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're going to be less likely to just repeat the past.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
To me, that's, and I just want to mention that that's, to me, it's really like the most important thing after having some basic tools around like core values under, and also around like having a regular meeting structure we de-escalate through having a regular family meeting structure
Right?
and relationship meeting structure. But it's like
Mm-hmm.
after those two things are like checked off, like the next thing is really that is like how can we show up differently in the future? Like what are our growing edges in this relationship, and how can we engage in that? Because if to me if it's not that, then we're just like it's gonna stagnate. We're gonna repeat the past. We're not helping each other live the kind of lives we want to live together, and yet, right? It's like, and yet, how many people just fall into like the comfort of like, I don't have to change. The other person needs to change, right? But as soon as we enter that third thing of like, hey,
Yes.
we are constantly changing and growing. How do we want to show up differently? How do we want to be in relationship this week, right? Like breaking
Correct.
it just down into that. Like, what do we want to test this week in our relationship,
Yes.
right? Like, what do we want to try out? How do we want to show up differently? And if we're not having that conversation, to me, it's like there's so much that will not be experienced. So if someone is looking at dissolving a relationship and they haven't, like you said, tried everything, or they're not taking this approach, they're just going to repeat the past with another person. There's no doubt in my
Spot on.
mind, right?
You're spot on. Absolutely. Yes.
All right. Any closing thoughts? This has been really fun to connect with you, Maggie.
Oh, thank you. No, it's been great for me too. My only closing thought is to say this: the more love in the world, the better. So, any action you take, no matter how microscopic, when you're kind to yourself, when you're kind to another person, that is how we change the world. It's not in these big sweeping moments, it's in the little moments that we all have that are loving towards each other. That would be my final thought.
Mm, I love it. And do you want to give them an action step, like maybe that first one that you do with the 10?
Oh, so self-appreciation is an exercise that you can do on different levels. So we were talking about some of the external things that you could be proud of, but it can be I'm proud of myself for being a loyal friend. I'm proud of myself for my yoga practice. I'm proud of myself for having compassion. You can definitely bring that to a very deep place. So the homework assignment, I am now everybody's life coach listening to this is to write down on a piece of paper, not just in your mind, not just in the car while you're driving, write down on a piece of paper 10 things that you appreciate about yourself, big things and little things. And then when you're having a bad day and you're not feeling great, you will have that list to remind you of who you really are.
Yay! Maggie Reyes, everyone. Modernmarried.com. Thank you, Maggie. That was a blast.
Thank you.